One said, gosh, there isn't a chapter on DNS. And they're like, oh yeah, that really should, we have a lot of opinions there. That should have been a best practices thing. And then another person said, well, this is a great system administration book, but oddly, they never tell you how to manage a web server. And I was like, oh my God, how could we forget that? Because in our mind, this book is about how to run a web server. Because to run a web server, you need to read the servers chapter. If you're running a colo facility, you need to read the data center chapter. Either way, you probably have to read the network chapter. And to deal with the customer service issues, you're going to need to have read the, if you have a formal help desk or the customer care chapter. So in our mind, this is all about building a web server, but we don't have a chapter called that. So the second edition is going to have a chapter. Okay, it'll probably be longer than this, but my idea is we'll have a chapter will be 1 page, and it'll say web servers. Read chapter 7 and 3, and you're done. No, we actually do have some things to say about web servers, but a lot of it is about change management. Once you start running a web server, you realize that the big issues become change management, security, and logging. And everything else is done by the graphic artists that you've hired, right? So,
Tom? Not firing, but normal termination. I mean, first you reverse provision the guy. Some people have been suggested you take an image of his whole hard disk or everything he's done. What do you think about that?
That's a good precaution. Any security policy you have always ends with, or it always gets, in the simple case we'll do this, if it's more difficult we'll do this, and if it's more difficult we'll do this, and the last case in that case statement is, and thank God we have backups, because that's your ultimate protection. So it would be a good insurance policy to take an image of the person's disk before you let them know that they've been laid off. But we actually go through a couple of case studies, and it depends on the person. There's been one of the case studies, the person was told you have a month, you're fired, but you have a month before you're actually let go. And that was because they felt that this person was ethical and responsible and was going to do an orderly transition. Another case study, it was the manager of the system administrators that was fired under extreme circumstances and had to be locked out of every system literally while he was on an airplane back from Interop. And the neat thing, so quick summary of the chapter, you have to lock out their physical access to the building, their remote access to the network, and their application access once they're in the network. If you screw up any of those two things, if you screw up any of those one things, the other two cover for you. But then you have to deal with Trojan horses and that kind of thing. So timeline. It was a little more than 2 years to write this book, and 13 months was spent actually writing the book. The other 11 months was on editing and pitching the idea and revisions. That's something we really didn't expect. They shouldn't call it writing a book. They should call it editing and revising this thing that you spent a little bit of time writing. Let's see. So I'll talk more about CVS in a little bit, but one nice thing about CVS is we were able to keep a log of when chapters were completed and then generate a graph. So if you notice, so we sort of took the summer off here. We wrote -1 chapter in that. Yeah, we recalled the chapter.
Where's the divorce in that chart?
What?
Where's the divorce in that chart?
The divorce in this chart was here.
Oh.
The legal separation, it was very important from an intellectual property point of view that the book did not begin until after moved out. Because then she would have half of the book, or a quarter of the book. And it was legal around here or something. I don't want to talk about that. But hey, if you're getting a divorce, writing a book is a great way to keep your mind off the pain and suffering. So this is the mom page. This is the page so that someday my mom will see this presentation and will say, look, Mom, they liked it. And this one's the best. Despite sporting a title that sounds about as interesting as the longest checker games I ever saw, Thomas Limoncelli and Christine Hogan's book, The Practice of System and Network Administration, is an exceptionally valuable book. And two will be given away for free, so you know the value is at least 0 plus 0. So I mentioned that I don't know Christine Hogan, and it's really true. And how do you collaborate with someone you don't know? So first I'm going to prove that we didn't know each other. Proof by example. So I live in New Jersey, and I worked at the school I went to, Drew University, in Mentor Graphics and Bell Labs and Lumeta. And this did not overlap with Christine's work history. She grew up in London, was working in California when we met, and her work history takes her Ireland, Italy, Silicon Valley, and London. And literally the way we met was I was originally going to write this book with someone else, and he dropped off the project. And so I was at Usenix's first intrusion detection symposium, maybe second. Anyway, the first one I went to, so it's the only one that matters. And I was at a coffee break bitching about the fact that my co-author dropped out, and I have a meeting with the publisher tomorrow, and here I'm in California, and what am I going to do? And the world needs this book. And this person with this beautiful British accent says, oh, I've been thinking about writing a book like that too. And I was like, oh, who are you? And are you serious? Or are you like, lunatic off the street? Because I have no way of telling. So during the next coffee break, I go around to all my friends and I'm like, do you know this person? Do you know this person? Turns out all of my California friends knew her and thought she was great and had worked with her and was indignant that I didn't already know her. I'm sorry, I don't know everybody. And it later turned out that some of the LISA conferences, often the only paper that I remembered was the one that she wrote, but she didn't present it, so I had never really seen her. She probably talked behind my back also and found out who I was. And we had this really good conversation about what should be in the book, and we saw eye to eye, so we got together. Now, and the other interesting thing was she was living in Silicon Valley, so I figured 3-hour time difference, I can deal with that. Right before we signed the contract with the publisher, she announced that she's moving to London to get a PhD. And so send my copy of the contract to this address at Imperial College. So it was sort of weird because this caught me off guard, and now I had to figure out what's the time difference to England, but -5. And but anyway, so halfway through writing the book, she started dating someone in California, so she was flying over me back and forth, never stopping in New Jersey. And the weird thing about this is I had met this guy when I was in high school, and they're now engaged, so that's good. Anyway, so in-person meetings are going to be very expensive because she would have to stop in New Jersey on the way to. And at the time of publication, we had only physically met each other at 7 different meetings. We're in very different time zones. We had different cultural backgrounds. We had untested personality compatibility. If you think loading Linux on a modern Dell laptop is difficult, imagine embarking on a 2-year project with someone who, you don't know. It could be a total mismatch. And we had very differing bandwidth. I was at Bell Labs. We had a big honkin' T3 that I ran. She had a 56K baud modem when she would billed by the minute when you're in the UK, or when her boyfriend was spending this telecommuting to work for the summer. He worked for Cisco, so he would, bring bandwidth with him. I come from Cisco, I bring bandwidth. So how do we meet these challenges? Well, when all else fails, follow the advice you give to other people. Maybe it'll work. And that's what we did. So we actually followed the advice in the book relating to relating to other people and dealing with team building issues. Sadly, the book hadn't been written yet, so we had this time travel paradox. But that's really what we did. And the cornerstone of the book is these 6 principles that you need to do the basics first. We talked about basics before. The issues of simplicity, clarity, generality, which are stolen from the Kernighan and Pike book, the practice of programming. Gee, similar title. And communication, which is the human communication, and automation. So everything you do as a sysadmin, think about these six things. Basics first. So the basics are about setting the ground rules, writing the security policy before you go to configure the firewall, writing the security policy before you decide if you need a firewall. So we had to have some long conversations where we hashed out what are the tools we're going to use. What was our formatting standard? Thank God we both are LaTeX fans. Terminology issues. How are we going to refer to the people that a sysadmin serves? Are they users or are they customers? And we refer to them as customers, and there's actually a section of the book that explains why, because we think it puts you into the right state of mind when you think about the relationship. How are we going to do the project management? We're going to be schedule driven, and we had to come up with a development cycle. Now, if you've ever been a system administrator at a software house, you learn that there's this like clockwork kind of development cycle that, say, the company releases new versions of the software every quarter, which means the last month of any quarter, no changes on the network because everything has to be stable. The first month of a quarter, you can make lots of changes because the architects are doing their planning, and it's mostly whiteboard work, so that's when the sysadmins can do their big revamping kind of things. And you have this clockwork schedule. Oh, and everything gets delayed if, no network changes if the software release is late. These kind of things. 2 companies ago, the previous company, when I was at Bell Labs, the weeks between when the books closed and when things had to be filed with the IRS was called network quiet time. And there was, unless the room was on fire, you could not configure a router because it was network quiet time. And it makes sense. You all know planning ahead is a good thing, development cycle. So we came up with this development cycle for each chapter, or each group of 4 chapters. We were going to try to write 4 chapters a month. I would write 2, she would write 2. So the first couple days of any month, we had a phone call, usually lasted about 4 hours, where we would discuss the next 4 chapters. We had already come up with this big global outline, and we had sort of brainstormed on the points we need to hit, but in this phone call we would really firm up the outline for that chapter. And then, so we had this cute terminology. We had the primary author and the secondary author for each chapter. So I wrote the backups chapter, so I'm the primary author and she's the secondary author. So I would write the chapter and send an email notification of primary author handoff, chapter 17 or whatever that is. And at primary author handoff, the secondary author then revises the chapter, adds, deletes, edits, whatever, and declares secondary author handoff. The primary author then does their revisions and does diffs to see what the secondary author changed. And at that point, they can either forward the chapter to the publisher or loop, send the chapter back to the secondary author. So each month, we were going through this process simultaneously on 4 chapters. And this actually worked really well. It was actually a little bit different when we started. One of the pieces of advice we give in the book is, after you come up with a policy, run through it once and then do some revisions. So this is the final process we came up with. And we're real process geeks, so this was great for us sending these official notifications. Simplicity. Keep things as simple as possible. We kept everything as simple ASCII files. It's easiest to manage. You can diff